بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وآله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Chapter number 5, Deprivation from Inheritance. And this chapter we discussed, first of all, what is the linguistic and legal definition of the Arabic word al-hajab, which we've translated into deprivation. Then we're going to talk about the types of deprivation, the deprivation that happens through a person's own trait or quality, and the deprivation that can happen because of another person. And the second type of deprivation about by another person either takes the form of denial, in which the second party is denied their inheritance altogether, or it takes in the form of a loss in which their shares are reduced. That's going to be followed by talking about those special heirs of a person that can never be denied mirath. And then obviously we will need to look at those people who possibly can be denied for amongst both men and women. Then we talk about a special case about brother grace and brother woe. Lastly, we have the conjoined issues and the conditions of the conjoined issue, which we won't be talking about today. It's a fairly complex discussion within the deprivation case, which once we know all of the issues related to mirath will be more easier to understand. So for today, we'll be focusing on the first 5 parts from this chapter. Now, hajab or deprivation, it linguistically, hajab means to block something, and it means to deny something. So, for example, the guard at a door is called a hajib, usually in the old courts of kings. The guards at the doors were known as hajib because they'd used to block people from entering into the chambers of the king unless permission was granted, right? So hajab means to block something or actually to deny someone anything, right? But legally, when talking about hajab in the context of fiqh and mirath, it means to deprive an heir from their inheritance either completely or partially. To drive an heir from their inheritance either completely or partially. Now, the types of deprivation, right? So there's trait deprivation, which we've already discussed in the first and the second chapter. We talked about that if a person murders the murith, they no longer are entitled to inheritance. If they're a slave, then they're not entitled to inheritance. If a family member is a non-Muslim, then they're not entitled to the inheritance of their Muslim family members. So these impediments that we discussed in the second chapter, these are the hajab by traits. Because of this quality that this person has, either being a slave, either being a non-Muslim, either having murdered the murith, a person is deprived of their inheritance, right? And this deprivation happens in a complete manner. It's not that you get partial inheritance, but you don't get anything from the inheritance. Then there's the second type of hajab, which is the person inheritance. That means because of a person who's more closer to the deceased in their relation, and not necessarily more closer either, but because of their relation with the deceased, they can affect the shares of an other heir. So this manifests in 2 forms. Either it's complete denial, in which if the closer relative is present, then the further away does not get anything. Like in the example of the son being present, the grandson, the granddaughter, they get nothing. So that's an example of the son being the person who denies the grandchildren the mirath entirely. And sometimes this takes in the manifestation of a loss. So for example, if the couple have children, right, and the husband, let's assume he dies, in the case there were no children, the wife would have got 1/4 of the entire legacy that he leaves behind. But because of the children, her share transforms from 1/4 to 1/8. Now she's at a loss because she's losing the bigger share that she could have gotten, but because of the children, she's not getting. So the children are the hajib in this case, and they are doing the hajab of their mother, the wife of the deceased. And so this is an example of a loss in which she's not deprived entirely of what she would be getting, but her share has been reduced. Now, talk about the heirs that can never be denied. So these include, first of all, a person's children, a son and daughter. This does not include the grandchildren. Usually, when we talk about son and daughters, the grandchildren are included, but in this case, it's specifically just the son and daughter of a person. Uh, the third is the mother, the fourth, the father. So parents, uh, they are those people who can never be denied. And lastly, you have the spouses, the husband on the fifth and wife on the sixth. So these are six people who, if they're present at the time that a person dies, they can never be completely denied inheritance, right? Some of them, it might be possible that their shares might be decreased. That is a possibility, but it can never be possible that they don't get anything at all, unless there is an exception that one of the impediments that we talked about is present. Say, for example, the father dies, the son would get mirath normally, but let's say if he were a slave, then in this case, he would be denied the mirath. Or if he, na'udhu billah, committed irtidad, left Islam, then again, he would be deprived of this mirath. Or if he was the one who murdered his father, he would be deprived of the mirath. So in normal circumstances, if there are no impediments, these six can never be deprived of mirath entirely. But if one of the impediments is found, that's another case. Now, other than these six, all other shareholders that we have discussed in detail, it's possible for all of them in cases to be denied. Right? So amongst the men, you have the grandfather, you have the brothers, whether they're full brothers, agnate half brothers, or uterine half brothers. You have the grandson, and obviously both grandfather and grandson include the great grandfather, great grandson, and so on. You also have the nephews, whether it's a full nephew, meaning the son of a full brother, or an agnate nephew, or the son of your agnate brother. Also, uncles can be possibly denied, whether they're full uncles or agnate uncles. Nephews too, whether full or agnate. And amongst the women, the grandmother can be denied, whether she's the maternal or paternal grandmother. The niece can be denied, right? Whether she's a full niece or an agnate niece. Their granddaughters can be denied. And lastly, the sisters, whether she's a full sister, an agnate half sister, or urine half sister. In one case or the other, all of them can be denied. Now let's talk about brother grace and brother woe. So in some cases, what happens is that a female heir was being denied inheritance for some reason, but her brother actually saves her and makes her into an asaba, which then allows her to actually be able to inherit some of the mirath, which she was on her own self being denied. She wasn't getting anything, but her brother saved her, and then she gets mirath, being part of the asaba with him. So this brother, he's known as the brother grace, or in Arabic, al-akhul mubarak or al-qarib al-mubarak, right? So whenever this scenario happens, that brother is known as akhul mubarak. So what are the cases? For example, number one, if there are two or more daughters, they get the two-thirds completely, and the granddaughter, she would be denied anything. But if there's also a grandson, right, he then transforms his sister into an asaba, although she wouldn't be getting anything if she were just a shareholder. But now that she's an asaba, she does get something. So in this case, the grandson is Brother Grace, who saved the granddaughter. Another case, for example, would be if there were two or more full sisters, they would get two-thirds of the mirath, and an Agnate sister would have been left behind with nothing. But at the same time, if this Agnate sister also has her Agnate brother with her, she becomes an asaba with him, and then inherits through being a residuary, right? So in this case, the Agnate brother is the Brother Grace, who saved his sister from being entirely deprived of the mirath. And then lastly, and then secondly, you have Brother Vo, and he is the complete opposite of Brother Grace, which means that if it weren't for him, his sister would have inherited, but because of him, now he gets nothing, right? So now then he gets absolutely nothing. And so for two examples, let's say the husband, the mother, the father, daughter, and granddaughter. These are the people that the deceased leaves behind. Now, the granddaughter in this case is the affected person here. Means that in this case, if she's present, she will be getting something from the mirath, right? But if her brother was also present, then she'd be denied anything. Like in this scenario, if you make the masala, the husband would get 1/4, the mother would get 1/6, the father would get 1/6 and would also be a residuary. The daughter would get a half, and the granddaughter would get 1/6 as well, right? But if the grandson was present, then in this case, he would become the asaba and transform her granddaughter, his sister, the granddaughter, into an asaba as well. But if that happens, do you know what is going to happen? The shares are going to be divided amongst the husband, mother, father, and daughter, and there will be nothing left to give to the asaba. So if she were the granddaughter, if she were a shareholder, she would have gotten something. But now that she's transformed into an asaba with her brother, all of the shares will be divided amongst the first four, and she would be left with nothing. So in this case, the grandson, her brother, is the Brother Vo, or in Arabic, al-akh al-mash'um, because of whom she lost any possible chances of receiving something from the mirath. A second example of this is husband, mother, uterine brother, full sister, and agnate sister. So if you would divide the mirath, husband would get 1/4, mother 1/6, uterine brother would get 1/6 as well. Full sister would gotten half, and agnate sister would have received 1/6 in this case as well. But if the agnate brother was present, she would not be a shareholder of 1/6 anymore. She would be an asaba. But the same problem would occur that the mirath would be completely divided between husband, mother, uterine brother, and full sister, and nothing would be left for the asaba. So in the second scenario as well, if her brother, the agnate brother, was present, uh, she would have been deprived from the mirath entirely, right? It's not specific to just these four cases. In any case, when this happens, these are just examples. So in any case, If a brother saves the sister from being entirely left out by transforming her into an asaba, he's brother grace, he's al-akhul mubarak. But the same brother, if in a scenario by transforming the sister into an asaba, he deprives her of whatever little she was receiving from the mirath, he is the akhul mash'um or brother-in-law. So hopefully that is understandable.